Well, hello, good morning. My name is Lorianne Smith, and this is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, the continuation. And it's just a show that I like to do really for survivors of abuse, especially child abuse. And we're looking at the Survivor to Thriver workbook, and I had the link in there with the show yesterday, but I had it in there wrong. They don't have for some reason, they don't have the HTTPS, but it's ascasupport.org. So www. Let me just type that in, www.ascasupport.org. That's where you can find the workbook. It's called Survivor to Thriver, and we're looking at that. Just reading through it, taking a look for people who, not sure what it is, and maybe, you might find it helpful if you're a survivor of abuse, especially child abuse, because that's what it's geared for. It's a Survivor to Thriver manual, and we already went through the first part of it, like the last few shows, so you can go back and watch that. That's what I'm doing. And so, if you're sensitive to the topics of anything to do with violence or abuse or any type of abuse, you need to sort of make sure you're okay to listen to this. These are topics of violence and abuse, so it can really disturb people. So you have to make sure that it's something you want to listen to. Otherwise, just turn it off or go listen to something else, go watch something else. These can, especially for survivors of abuse, this type of information can trigger survivors, especially if you're just starting out on your healing journey. And, you want to make sure you're safe enough to be listening to something like this. And how you can do a safety check is just to say to yourself, I could say to myself, am I feeling safe? Am I feeling strong enough to listen to this? Is it going to cause me to feel down or depressed or angry, volatile? Am I going to hurt myself or hurt somebody else? And you ask yourself those questions. And, if you're feeling strong and safe and, I could handle this, listening to this material. We're looking at a section of talking about rejection and terrorizing and all that sort of stuff to do with emotional abuse. And so that's where we left off yesterday. So that's where we're going to pick up today. I'm not going to repeat what we did yesterday. You can go back and grab that. But that's what we're looking at today. So we finished up. This is page 42 of that manual. It's called Emotional Abuse. And there's five behavioral clusters. That's what they call it. Psychologist James Carbarino defined emotional abuse in terms of five behavioral clusters called that's rejecting, terrorizing, ignoring, isolating, and corrupting. But that's just his view of it. But the thing is this is what is categorized as emotional abuse, right? And emotional abuse is horrific for any child to have to go through. All children go through some emotional abuse at some point because no parent is perfect and no caregiver is perfect. Even other children aren't perfect. Children aren't perfect, right? So people do hurt, say hurtful things and stuff like that. But this is when it's repeated and it's intended to hurt and harm the child. That's when it's abuse, right? So it's not just that a parent had a bad day and said something or made the child feel a certain way, and because they were just having a bad day, sort of thing. Sort of an isolated, event. Doesn't happen all the time. Wouldn't even happen on a regular basis. That can happen. Parents do lose their cool. Children lose their cool. Parents lose their cool. And any parent can have a bad day, say the wrong things. It's really great if a parent makes it right by apologizing and making it right. Quite often that doesn't happen, but sometimes it does. And that is just the issue. A one-time thing or just rare occurrence is really not necessarily abuse. It's sad, but the thing is, it shouldn't happen anyway. But it's sad. But the thing is it's when it's regular occurrence and it's meant to hurt and harm the child. It's like a tool that an abusive person will use. Emotional abuse is very damaging, and so that's what that's what we're looking at. So we're going to pick up with the next section, which is ignoring. And I'm just reading right from their webpage. You can get this manual for free, like I said. Hi, Melissa. I hope you're having a good day. And we're looking at Survivor to Thriver manual and from the ASC, Adult Survivors of Child Abuse and More Center program. You can get that for free if you haven't seen it. Lots of people have seen it, but many haven't. That's why I keep mentioning it. It's a helpful resource for me. I went through the whole entire thing, and when I first started my healing journey and actually did the questions and read the whole thing. I've used it actually ever since, and it's really quite good. I thought it was helpful. Not everybody would find it helpful, but I did. But they're just talking about what is child abuse, and we already went through physical abuse, sexual abuse. Now we're looking at emotional abuse. So ignoring entails depriving the child of essential stimulation and responsiveness, thereby stifling emotional growth and intellectual development. Ignoring refers to the condition in which, due to excessive preoccupation with their own issues, the parents are emotionally unavailable to the child. So in contrast to rejecting, which is actively abusive, ignoring is passive and neglectful. Ignoring behaviors include not responding to the child's talk, not recognizing the child's developing abilities, leaving the child without appropriate adult supervision, not protecting the child from physical or emotional assault by siblings or friends, not showing interest in the child's school progress and focusing on other relationships to the point that the child feels displaced. Emotional neglect may be the most common type of abuse, but it may also be the least reported. Well, this is just it, emotional neglect, right? Ignoring. That's horrible to have to grow up in that, and many children do. And sadly enough, and it is abuse if it's done repeatedly. It's something that's repeated, often, I would say. And if it's meant to hurt and harm the child, if it's on purpose, then it's just horrific. Emotional abuse, yeah, Melissa, I agree. It is emotional abuse is what caused most of the damage to me. I survived the physical abuse. The sexual abuse was horrible. It was horrible, but still, I'll just speak about myself. The emotional trauma was what really stayed with me and actually caused me a lot of problems as a young person, as a young adult, and then even in my older years. So emotional abuse is absolutely horrible. Many people, like I was talking yesterday, they don't think that emotional abuse is really all that bad. Some people will say, well, I wasn't physically abused, or, some survivors will say, oh, I wasn't sexually abused. So I wasn't really abused. I was just emotionally abused. I was just emotionally abused. This is like as if it's no big deal. Emotional abuse is horrific. And, it's actually part of physical abuse and sexual abuse because there is emotional abuse with that. But some survivors have not been sexually abused or physically abused, so they don't think they've been abused because they don't consider emotional abuse to be that big of a deal. And it really is. It's horrific. Like I was saying yesterday on my show, even if I had not been physically abused or sexually abused, the emotional abuse would have been enough to put me over the edge. So that's why two of my brothers killed themselves. They were physically abused. I don't know if they were sexually abused, but I know they were physically abused. And the emotional abuse on top of that just drove them to suicide. So it's very deadly, very damaging. And when it's done to hurt and harm a child, it's abuse, it's a criminal activity. It's really hard to prove in court because there's no scars, there's no physical evidence of the abuse. So it's hard to get a conviction when a child is emotionally abused and there's no real physical evidence of that. There has to be documentation, tons of documentation, record keeping from somebody who would have been looking in on the situation. Very hard to prove in court. And so many children are abused emotionally all the time. But like I was saying when I first started here on the show this morning, parents do have a bad day, and they do, they make mistakes too. And not every parent, just because they hurt a child by being emotionally abusive one time because they just had a horrible day, and then they make it right or something, which would be nice. It doesn't always happen. That's not really abuse, but when it's done over and over and over, that's just the lifestyle. That's the way the child's being brought up or looked after, and it's just all the time, consistent, constant emotional abuse. Then it's abuse, right? And so it's a horrific thing, right? Absolutely. So they go on to say, actually, that's all they have on the ignoring section. Isolating is the next one up. Isolating involves this is on page 44 of the Survivor to Thriver manual, if anybody wants to grab it. And you can find it on the website. If you don't want to download it, you can actually just read it as a web page. I'm pretty sure that they still have it set up like that for people like with phones or whatever that don't want to download it and just want to read it. I think it's set up as a readable web page that you can just go page by page on the website. It used to be. I actually should check that out because I'm just not sure. I know they used to have it on there, just as a readable like web page. So isolating is next. Isolating involves the adults cutting the child off from normal social experiences, thereby preventing the child from forming friendships and reinforcing the child's belief that he or she is alone in the world. Isolating the child from normal opportunities for social relations is another form of emotional abuse because it impedes the social development of the child. So included here are efforts by the parents to put the child at odds with friends, presenting outsiders as the object of suspicion, reinforcing the child's concerns about peer acceptance, and thwarting the child's attempts to be industrious and self-sufficient. Specific behaviors that tend to result in isolation are preventing children from seeing family or friends, preventing receipt of appropriate medical care, punishing the child's social overtures, and rewarding the child for avoiding social situations, prohibiting the child from inviting other children home, withdrawing the child from school and preventing the child from joining clubs or dating. And because children tend to become more socially active as they get older, it is far easier to seclude a young child than an older one. And that's just sad, man. That's abuse. It really is. It's not okay. But so many children actually go through this, and or parts of this. They're saying my connection is no good, but it's been doing that for a couple of days now. I don't know why. It didn't used to, so I think it's my internet. So it says families that are members of strict or closed religious groups may be especially prone to isolation and have been known to keep their children out of school because of the outside world so conflicts with their personal beliefs and values. So, however, there are certain religions which de-emphasize and even prohibit certain contacts with the outside world, especially those involving doctors and medical procedures. In these contexts, the isolating behavior does not necessarily constitute abuse. If you grew up in this kind of atmosphere, there may be an explanation for why your family engaged in isolating behaviors. So isolation is also common in families where father-daughter incest exists. In these cases, the father wants to keep the child at home to preserve his access to her and to limit the possibility that she will tell someone about the incest. Many times, incest comes to light only after several years when the girl, now a teenager, tells somebody in a peer group what's been going on at home, or later on in life will tell somebody, right? Yeah, it's terrible, and we know it does happen, and it's not okay. Like I'm saying, but some people will think, well, I wasn't abused physically, or some people not sexually, but emotional abuse was a problem. But emotional abuse is horrific, right? So it's just not good. So they go on that's it for that one. These are just sort of short snippets on these 5. This guy sort of came up with 5 sort of sets of behaviors that he thought were best described emotional abuse, right? There's a whole lot more to it than this. This is just very brief snippets. I've actually looked at a lot of material, and even in John Bradshaw's books, Healing the Shame That Binds You and the Homecoming, Healing and Reclaiming Your Inner Child, or something like that. Those 2 books had a lot to say about all this stuff, a lot more than here. This is just a brief snippet from the ASCA, Adult Survivors of Child Abuse, to let, actually what it is it's a survivor workbook. And they give you an idea of what this stuff is, because many times people will have been abused, survivors will start their healing journey, and they don't even realize what type of abuse they've been through if they've never studied it out or read anything on it. So they include this little bit of information here. This is not really what the whole manual is about. It just gives you an idea of what are the different types of abuse, and what they're comprised of, really. So it says I have a bad connection. Hopefully you can still hear me. Oh, okay. Corrupting is the last one, and then they ask some questions. So corrupting involves encouraging the child to engage in antisocial behavior that reinforces deviant social attitudes. Most frequently, the corruption has to do with suggesting inappropriate ways of handling aggression, sexuality, or substance abuse. And by encouraging antisocial values and behaviors and discouraging the learning of positive social attitudes and skills, the parents hinder the child's social development. Sometimes a child evolves an identity that puts him or her at odds with the conventions and standards of society. Some examples of corrupting behavior include reinforcing the child for sexual behavior, condoning drug use, rewarding aggressive behavior, exposing the child to pornography, and involving the child in criminal activities such as prostitution, drug dealing, or insurance fraud. Another example is parents who force their racist or exclusionary attitudes on their children and encourage them to act on these beliefs in ways that cause problems for them with peers at school and even with the law. So that's all a form of emotional abuse. All those things are corrupting, isolating, ignoring, terrorizing, and rejecting. So, but those are just short snippets. There's a lot more to it than that. It's absolutely horrific. The journal questions they ask are quite interesting. They start up with 11 because they didn't start with one. One was the first part, so they kept the questions going, in order. So it's kind of funny. So this, instead of starting with 1 here, we're starting with 11. So question 11, did your parents frequently rant and rave about what a horrible, stupid, or ugly child you were? That's emotional abuse. You know what I mean? People who've gone through that, if your parents rant and raved, that you were any number of things, that's emotional abuse. Did they involve you in some illegal activity? Question 13, did your parents prevent you from having friends? Question 14, did they refuse to take you to the doctor when you were sick? Absent religious constraints, they said, which I still think is bogus. If a child's sick or needs medical attention, they have the right to get it, actually. It's against the law to not allow a child to get medical attention. 15, would they frequently ignore you by refusing to speak or listen to you? 16, were you left alone for extended periods of time before the age of 10? 17, did your parents make you stay home from school to take care of brothers or sisters? 18, would they threaten to leave you or kill you if you did not do what they said? 19, did you often make disparaging comments about men or women and predict that you would grow up to be just as bad? That's all emotional abuse, totally. Number 20, would your parents sabotage your efforts to succeed at school, sports, work, or relationships with friends? So they said, after reading this section, you have some guidelines as to what constitutes physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. Now you can use this knowledge as a standard to determine what actually happened to you. If you have some memories that you determined were abusive, write them down in your journal. See if you can add the fine details to give a more complete rendering of the experience. Jot down all thoughts, feelings, associations, and images that are evoked by this memory. If you have no or few memories from the past, you may still need more time to remember. Or you may not have been abused. So if you weren't in fact abused, you don't want to get caught up in the feeling that you must have been. If this is the case, consider yourself fortunate. Some people, I've met people that don't have a lot of memories of their childhood, and many times children who are abused will dissociate. And my sister's one, she has no memories of her childhood at all. And so she used to come to me for information before we stopped talking. But now we don't talk. But she used to wonder, about stuff, and she'd be like, well, I wasn't there. I'd be like, you were there, and you were sitting on the couch, or, I'd tell her where she was in the room or whatever was going on. She was like, how can you remember that? And I'm like, I remember everything, just about, Sure, there's some things I've forgotten, or just didn't hang on to, but I've got most of my memories intact. She doesn't have any, but I think she dissociated, for sure. So that can happen, right? And so then people wonder if they really were abused or not. That's sometimes, people will go to a therapist to get help with that, because they can help with bringing memories to where you can get a hold of them. There's treatments for that. I know there are. I'm not sure what they're called. I don't go to therapy. I don't see a therapist or anything. So I've never had any of that type of treatment. So, but I know that there is stuff like that will help people survivors of abuse to actually get a hold of those memories. I kind of feel like they come when you're ready to handle them, because I had issues with that with the CSA child, with the sexual abuse that I suffered. I didn't want to remember it, and I mean, who can blame me? To be honest with you, I really didn't want to remember it, but it was there. It was always there, and I knew it happened. I had flashbacks of certain things that had happened during the sexual assaults, and so I was 8 years old, see, so I was young, and I was being abused by my parents, and so I needed to stuff that so that I could try to survive. And then later in life, I had difficulty kind of bringing back to my memory some of the stuff, but I'd always have these like flashbacks, and I was like, I knew who had done it. I knew it was my brother Rob. But the thing is um, I just didn't want to look at it. I didn't want to see it, in my mind's memory. I didn't want to get a hold of it. So I had always in the back of my mind thought, I didn't want to say I had been raped as a child. It was too hard for me. So I would have some friends, and especially in high school, and even after that in my young adult life, that would tell me they were sexually abused or abused, and I would say, oh yeah, that's awful, and I'd say, well, I was molested. I would say stuff like that, but I would never ever say that I was raped, right? Because I didn't want to. I didn't want to know that. I didn't want to remember that. You know. So many times people memories don't come until you're actually able to handle it. That's what I believe. And I started working on the CSA child sexual abuse stuff in around 2010, 2011. And 2012 is when I really got a hold of it and allowed myself to remember. And it was horrible. It was absolutely a nightmare. But I had a good friend helping me through it, Kate Mitchell, out of Australia. She used to be a psychotherapist helping survivors of abuse. And she's helped so many survivors of abuse to get through, in the past. So she's my good friend, and she helped me get through that. But until my mind was ready to deal with it, I don't think I could deal with it. So sometimes people want to rush this stuff. They'll want to rush the memories. They want to get it over with and think, oh, if I could just, get a hold of this stuff and then I could just move past it. But it doesn't really work that way. I think it's the brain protects itself. It protects you. So, when you're ready, I believe that it will allow that stuff to come. Some people never deal with this stuff until they're, in their late 50s and 60s. And I mean, I started at the age of 42, but that's just when it happened for me. But I was having a breakdown, but actually they call it a breakthrough, So I can look at it two ways. I mean, I was having a breakdown because of the abuse I suffered, but actually it was a breakthrough because it's what motivated me to get help and, not struggle with this stuff. So, yeah, it's hard. This stuff is so hard, right? It really is. So, it's just that information there was just for people to, take a look and see what is abuse and did you go through any of those things, and, if you're not sure and you just think, I don't know, I have these vague memories, but I'm just not sure, there's help for people, especially with different types of therapy. There's help for people with that situation going on. Find a good therapist who knows about child abuse, knows about adult survivor issues, and can, help you. Right? So important. So the next part of this manual is page 47. What are the adult repercussions of child abuse? They said if survivors of child abuse share many common experiences as children, it should be no surprise that they may also share many of the long-term effects of child abuse. And these problems often have a pervasive impact on all areas of a survivor's life. Following is a discussion of some of the most frequently cited problems experienced by adult survivors and some journal questions to help you in determining whether each issue is problematic for you. So not everyone shares all the different types of symptoms, nor do all survivors experience the same degree of intensity of the problems. You will have to determine which of the following problems are primary, which are secondary in your life. Recognize what seems to apply to you, make a note of it, and leave the rest. So that's right. I mean, when you're looking at this stuff, for instance, the child sexual abuse, if you weren't abused as a child sexually, you don't need to work on that. So, you don't have to stress yourself out over stuff that doesn't apply to you. For me, I was abused in every way. So that's why I just look at it all because I'm like, oh, I just need help with it all. But, if you weren't abused physically, you don't need to worry about that. You don't have to even look at the stuff. So they said use the journal questions as a framework and remember that the fact that you experience any or all of these problems does not prove that you were abused as a child or that the abuse you suffered is the cause of your current problems. These self-perceptions and problems can stem from a variety of other sources, both internal and external. So the person has to get in touch with what's going on in their life. If you're having troubles, and really that's what I had to do, was sit down and take a look at why I wanted to kill myself for so many years. I knew why, but I needed to sit down and say, that's not okay. That's not what regular, normal people do on a regular basis. I need help. And I realized I needed help, and I needed to sit down and look at all the different areas in my life that were problem areas and start working through it. And it was a big job. That's why it's taken me so long. And I work all the time too, so I'm busy. But right now I'm not working. That's why I'm off doing all these shows, because I've got time, right? But it's so hard, right? These things, they really are. But we don't, when we're reading these manuals or anything about child abuse and stuff like that, you don't want to take it on as if it's your own, if it's not your own. You know what I mean? Don't take the stress of it on if it's not your own, because that's no good, right? If you don't have problems in certain areas, don't get stressed out over the material. Just pass it over and whatever. It doesn't apply to me. That's what I do. Because not everything applies to me either. I wasn't trafficked, I know survivors who were trafficked as children. I don't have to worry about the trafficking information. I do, because I'm a child abuse prevention speaker, but the thing is I don't take that on as my own abuse, I mean, so I don't really look at the adult repercussions of being trafficked, because I wasn't trafficked. You know what I mean? This kind of stuff, right? Don't take it on if it's not yours, right? Because it's hard enough dealing with our own stuff, let alone trying to take on something that doesn't really pertain to us. You know what I mean? They say relationship problems, that's a big deal. And then they go and ask some questions about that. Relationship problems, this is page 47, so page 48. Adult survivors often have a difficult time initiating, maintaining, and enjoying relationships. Any kind of relationship, ranging from collegial relationships at work to personal friendships to parent-child relationships to intimate romantic relationships, may be problematic. Relationships for survivors may reflect the all or nothing syndrome, either too few or too many relationships that seem to come and go like people through a revolving door. In some relationships, the survivor may assume a particular role and proceed to play out a replication of the past abuse. Given that child abuse most often occurs in the context of family relationships, the possibility of your repeating old patterns in personal adult relationships should not be underestimated. That's very true, and that's why I decided to do work like from John Bradshaw's books, because he really, if you haven't read those two books, those are actually really good. And they show you all about role playing and the stuff that we take on from being abused as children. And then we quite often will play those same roles throughout our life, right? Because we don't know that we've been doing this, right? And those books showed me all sorts of things that I didn't realize I was doing. That was like, I didn't recognize that that's why I was doing it. And I was like, oh, wow. So it helped me to learn to change, to stop playing the roles that my abusive family had put on me, that it showed me that I took on, or that were shown to me how to exist in this very dysfunctional, abusive home. Those roles needed to be done away with, right? I'm no longer, I'm a grown woman. You know what I mean? I'm my own person. I'm not being abused anymore. I needed to change that stuff. So those books helped me out a lot. John Bradshaw's books. And The Dance of Wounded Souls, also from Robert Burney. Codependency, The Dance of Wounded Souls. That was really, really good too. And they said relationships can be difficult because they call upon personal characteristics and emotional capabilities that are often new to adult survivors, such as trust. Yeah, no kidding. Assertiveness, intimacy, self-confidence, good communication skills, the ability to give and receive affection, self-awareness and empathy for others, and acceptance of one's own feelings and needs. So many adult survivors find their personal relationships characterized by fighting, feeling misunderstood, projecting blame on each other, feeling overwhelmed by powerful moods. Frequently, adult survivors anticipate rejection or non-acceptance and protect themselves by withdrawing or becoming overly aggressive. So these behaviors and others are probably ones you adopted as a child to help defend yourself against the abuse, but they may not be productive or healthy in adult relationships. So that's just the issue. My inner children's, was when I read this originally, this manual, when I first started my healing journey, I was like, yeah, that makes total sense. But as I started really looking into the stuff through the years, I realized that I had a bunch of inner children that were wounded, that was just me at these different points of wounding that were running my adult life. So that's a that's a 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old me running my adult life after being abused. Like that's not a good thing. I was doing all sorts of things that I used to do to try to protect myself, um, and ruining my adult life because my inner wounded self was running the show and driving the bus. They say, don't let your inner self drive the bus. Your inner wounded children. It's not a good idea. We're the adult in this situation, right? So this program that my friend Kate Mitchell worked with me on was very helpful, and it actually. Hi, Wanda. I hope your day is going well. And yeah, I mean, that was awesome, that program. And I mean, it's not free to do. It costs money. It's not like a whole lot of money, but it does cost a few bucks. But it's called My Envisioned Mind. It used to be called Your Envisioned Mind, but they've changed the title a couple of times. But they're trying to reach people. So I think they keep thinking, well, if we change the title, it'll reach more people. Anyway, it's a program out of Australia, Beverly Searle. I actually did a show on it here. If you looked in my playlist of guests and stuff, I think I've got one there of guests. I'm not sure. On my website, I do. But anyway, Beverly Searle, her program called My Envisioned Mind helped me out immensely. But my friend did that for me for free because she's my she's my psychotherapist friend. So, I mean, how many people have a psychotherapist friend? Yeah. The thing is these two ladies worked with me on this program, and they did it for me for free because I didn't have a dime to pay for it. I was broke, and they were my friends, and they just did it for me. But I did an interview with that lady in Beverly Searle, but my good friend is Kate Mitchell, and she spent a whole year, probably a year and a half, working on that stuff with me with this program. That was really awesome because it really helped me out a lot. Let me tell you. And I didn't even believe in that inner child stuff. I didn't like it, but it's actually what made all the difference. So it maybe doesn't necessarily pertain to you, but that's what I had to do. But it really helped me out a lot. And so yeah, what worked for us in the past because we we're trying to protect ourselves from the abuse, which obviously children cannot protect themselves, but things that we tried to use to defend or protect ourselves then are not healthy in our adult life, right? So that's what they're talking about there. So after years of not feeling their feelings or expressing them to others, many survivors feel limited in their daily dialogue with a loved one. Making changes in your relationships begins with developing awareness about which modes of communication work and which don't. Discuss with your partner when and how best to talk to each other in any relationship. There has to be trust, and you survivors of abuse don't trust anybody, and it's kind of no wonder why, right? You've been hurt and wounded badly, not just your normal wounding that might come, people who haven't been abused get wounded too. Everybody on the planet has been wounded at some point. So, this is life, right? But when you're a survivor of abuse and you've just had so much wounding, it's really no wonder that we have trust issues. I know I did. And now I've got boundaries set, and my boundaries are really pretty solid, like I always say. But I have to work on stuff all the time, because I still have these. My natural reaction is to push away anybody who gets too close to me in any relationship, doesn't matter what it is. And so either I quit and leave and run off to another country or another province or whatever, or to another job, whatever it is, anything in my life, to another friend. It's like, but I turn it on them and make it look like it's them, but it's actually me, and I don't want them getting any closer. So they're not, because that's just my protective. That's my inner wounded children saying, Oh, stop sign, somebody too close, back up the bus. Um, so, I've ruined a lot of relationships because I do it myself. It's not that I'm getting screwed over by so many people. The issue is I don't trust people. So I quite often will ruin perfectly good relationships from people that actually love me and care about me as an adult. Because I didn't have any love and care as a child, so I mean, whatever, that wasn't my fault. But as an adult, I've got good friends who care about me that I will cut off because my wounded inner children are like, they're going to hurt us. They're going to hurt us. They are. And so it's really horrific, right? So what I've been doing the last so many years is recognizing the signs of what I'm doing. I started to recognize when I start to feel this stuff because I've cut off some of my very best friends. Some people that would never hurt me on purpose. People can always hurt people, right? So, sometimes people will do things or say things that do hurt us, and then, we want them to make it right. And then, but if we do that to them, we need to make it right. See, this is the issue. Works both ways. So, I'm getting better as I get older. I'm now 55. I mean, how many years do I got to go here? You know what I mean? Not that many. And the issue is, I mean, I don't want to keep cutting off my good friends who actually really do love and care for me and would never hurt me if, on purpose ever, right? I accidentally say something that I didn't mean to hurt me or something, you know what I mean? Because that's kind of possible with every relationship. But they would never intentionally do anything to hurt me. And my inner children are like, we don't trust them. See, my inner children are still kind of running the show. This inner wounded part of myself that I'm still working through. That's why I know I still have some work to do. But the thing is I'm learning to recognize when I start to do this now because I'm learning the signs. I started paying attention to what leads up to this stuff, and now I know what to look for. So I'm getting better at um, not allowing that to happen and work through things with my friends instead of just cutting them off. Well, no, they're going to hurt me or they've hurt me. They're out. Um, and all sorts of things. That's just one example of problems that I have in my life as an adult survivor of abuse, right? And I mean, I'm working on all sorts of things, right? Little by little, it does take time because I don't recognize a lot of it till it happens and comes up. And then I'm like, oh, this seems to be a repeated pattern. I keep doing this. Why do I keep doing this? And I got to sit down and think, okay, why do I keep doing this? Fear-based mostly, because I've been so wounded so badly by people that should have loved and cared about me, traumatized me. Right? So then as an adult, and I never got any help, see. So as an adult, I'm like, that's just no good, right? That's why I'm working through this stuff. It's just so important because, we didn't deserve that. We deserve to have a good life, right? And we shouldn't be sabotaging ourselves. It's bad enough that in life, others can hurt us, and life is very, very stressful. Things happen, right? So, but it just makes it worse when we're actually kind of our own worst enemy. That's no good. And no, that's why I keep saying, it's really important to reach out and get some help somehow, whatever kind of help it is for you. Um, because we don't want to be self-sabotaging because we were abused as children. I think that's devastating. Like my two brothers did, killed themselves, right? And so many people do. And so many people will die from drug overdoses and kill themselves, um, alcoholism, right? I mean, I was there when I was young, got off the drugs because I knew what that was going to do. But the thing is, you know, just even in is in just simple stuff like jobs, you know, keeping jobs, relationship stuff, taking care of things that need to be done, taking care of ourselves, taking care of our own bodies, taking care of relationships, right? All this stuff can be really great and work for us to our advantage, or we can actually sabotage it and it can be horrible, right? So this is why this is really important to get in here and actually study this stuff out and figure out what's going on in our own personal lives. I'm just giving you a taste of what I go through and the difficulties that I have, right? Which are all sorts of them. Right? The questions that they have on this section of what are the adult repercussions of child abuse are question 21. This is page 48 of this manual. Do you find it hard to maintain close, trusting relationships? 22. Do you have a habit of choosing relationships that don't work? 23, do you notice choosing friends or lovers because of their similarity or dissimilarity to your abuser? Number 24, do you find it difficult to give and receive affection? Number 25, do you see a pattern of clinging to or distancing yourself from people? Number 26, do you find yourself testing others' commitment to you? 27, do you expect to be left or rejected by your relationships? 28, do you get anxious or scared when someone gets too close? 29, do you often feel used or taken advantage of? 30, do you often fight with little hope of resolving differences? I mean, that stuff is harsh, right? In our adult life. So many survivors were, shut down and just, maybe they don't feel they're ever going to find love or find happiness or find peace, you know. And it's really hard to do it on your own. I was talking here on a show, I don't know when it was a while back, maybe a few weeks ago or something. But I was saying, I was always like this one, like I'm my own island. You know what I mean? I'm just my own island. I can handle it. I'm just my own island, all by myself. Always in, life, I've sort of been like that. And it's kind of like, I can just do this myself. And without relationships and love, from other people, it's not so much fun being an island unto ourselves. It's kind of like, okay, so we close off, right? We close off, put these walls up, become like this isolated island to myself, so I don't have to be hurt anymore, right? That's not living. That's existing, but it's not living. So there is some, as far as relationships stuff goes for adult survivors of child abuse, it's well, thank you very much, insert coins. I appreciate that. Well, I just try to be honest, really brutally honest about myself. That's kind of more helpful to somebody who's been abused, instead of getting on here and saying, oh, you can do it, look at me, I'm great. It's like, no, I'm a working project. I'm actually kind of a bit of a tragic mess, but I'm doing okay. But the thing is, I just want to be honest so that other people will see an honest view of the difficulties and how hard it is. And also for survivors to know that, hey, you're not alone. You know what I mean? There's a lot of us out here doing this, and we're all sort of, just muddling through. So it's what I say, just don't muddle through on your own. It's a sad place to be. I did that for years. And I've learned to trust, because I want people to trust me. Now, I'm not talking work stuff. I used to actually have a high positions of trust at work, because I used to work for banks, and I used to work for like I used to work in the back office, like not the teller. I was back in the back office moving millions of dollars, millions and millions and billions of dollars around. So that was my job. It was a high trust job. I had to have a bondability for like $250 million or something like that. It's not the job stuff. I've always been able to been very blessed to be able to just, or lucky, whatever you want to say, to be able to work and function in a job atmosphere and stuff like that. So, it's not work trust I'm talking about, because jobs trusted me to do a good job for them. I've always worked for kind of high trust jobs like banks and money processing centers, moving lots of money around, stuff like that. You have to have a good record to be able to do stuff like that. You know what I mean? They don't just let anybody have those jobs. They do check up on you before you get that job, in every way, to make sure that you're not a thief. You know what I mean? We're going to rip them off somehow. So, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about relationship stuff, trusting people, right? To let friends, whatever, companion, whatever, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, whatever. Friendships, anything like that. I want people to trust me because I want to trust them. See? And I'm thinking, hey, if I want to trust them, they should be able to trust me. So, okay, I'm going to behave myself. I'm going to be a good friend, and I'm not going to hurt them. And if I do, I'm going to make it right. And I expect that back from them, because that's I'm learning how to do that. You know what I mean? But in the meantime, my inner children who are running the show still, partly my wounded self, is still afraid, right? So they're always kind of like, oh, getting too close, getting too close. You got to shut them out. Don't let them get too close. They're gonna hurt us, you know. And it's like my adult self has to then do this inner child work, which I do go in. It's a meditation process, and go in and reparent these children. You know, I'm the adult, and I actually let my inner self see my outer self, and I'm like, see, we're not being abused anymore. We're making good friends. And, I have to redo this stuff with my wounded self, right? Which is really bizarre, but it's absolutely, it works for me. And, yeah, oh, I'm reading your comment, insert coins. And that's just so sad. It's just so, I'm so sorry. It's just terrible, you know, what people go through. And like we know, so many people are abused, in so many ways, right? And it's horrific. It's absolutely horrific. Yeah, yeah, it's just terrible. Yeah, that's hard for a child to go through, and to watch a parent suffer like that. And that's kind of see, that's my situation too, and that's why I always include my parents' story in there too, because my parents were both abused. My mom was abused, and she used to cry the blues about her childhood and stuff, and she would cry about what happened to her siblings and to her. And, my dad wouldn't say too much about his stuff, but my mom would quite often be crying at the table, just suffering from her past abuse. But she was also abused by my dad. So she was in this marriage that was horrible. So she was re victimized. And I did feel sorry for her. I did feel sad for her. And this is the issue. I didn't want my mom to be hurt. You know what I mean? Like I was always really, I mean, when I got older, I used to try to protect my mom from my dad. But the thing is it's hard for a child to watch their parents suffering like that because they were abused. And it's horrible. So yeah, I don't, I always tell my mom's story with that, you know, to be truthful and honest about it. My mom's problems were a lot of them because she was abused. She didn't get any help, and then she married my dad, who was an abusive, physically abusive, psychologically abusive man. And so, she was just a mess, right? And so this is, I could see what was causing the issues, but the issue is there's no excuse for abuse. I can't just excuse that away. I can't just say, oh, mom was just stressed out, so that's why she beat me and, terrorized me my whole entire childhood. And then later as an adult reinforced it. So this is why, I was able to uh, keep it separate. You know what I mean? Like some people would say, I've had people say, I don't know how you could say you loved your mom or you loved your parents. Because when I was young, I thought that I hated them. I mean, when I was a kid, I was sort of, you know, especially a teenager, had a little bit of hatred for them because of what they had done to each other and to all of my siblings and to me. And but I realized later that I didn't hate them. I really love my parents. That's why it hurt so bad. If I would have hated them, I think that's kind of was my way of protecting myself. Well, I hate them, so it doesn't matter anyway. But actually, that was me just protecting myself so it wouldn't hurt so bad. Because then when I started to realize that I really did love my parents, I hated what they did. So I had to separate it out. I'm like, okay, I hated what they did. I didn't really hate them. And so that's the issue, and that's being vulnerable. Okay, well, I love them, but they really, really hurt me bad. You know what I mean? But I really did love my parents, absolutely. And I know when I was really little, I really did. I used to write my mom poems and stuff. And I always, in my poems, I used to write in Spanish because I speak Spanish. I learned Spanish a long time ago, and I really love it. I still speak it and write it and read it. But I used to, when I was like, oh, I don't know how old, I was in sixth, seventh grade, so I had just learned Spanish, and I would write her poems in Spanish. So she was my moon, my stars, and I tried to make her feel better. See, I always wanted my mom to feel better. I wanted her to love me, you know, and that I wanted her to see that I loved her. So I would translate the poems for her because I'd write them in Spanish and then I would tell her in Spanish and then I would read them I would translate it in English to her. And she just didn't want my love, you know, she just pushed me away. She just rejected me completely, abused me. So the thing is I was able to separate the fact that, yeah, I did love my parents very much, but what they did was wrong. And it's not okay, right? And it's so hard, right? My parents are both passed away, both of them. My mom died when I was 30, and my dad passed away just a few years ago, 2016. I actually had cut my dad off after I showed him the book because um, he was an old man. But the thing is he was still so toxic. I cut him off, but I did tell him I was cutting him off, and I told him why, and I was very nice to him. And I told him, I won't be seeing you again because he was at a seniors facility here in Calgary. He wanted to come up here, so he caused me a lot of stress and a lot of grief as an older adult, 44 years old. And I had written the books and I gave him the copy of the book to read, but he wouldn't read it. But I just told him, I said, when I saw him, we had him put into a seniors facility because he was just too toxic. And he was psychologically unwell. He was schizophrenic as well as borderline personality disorder. So he never got any help with that stuff. He was just always a mess. So we had got him into a really nice, cushy place, which I kind of wanted to move into because it was really nicer than my place. I was like, man, this place is nice. Like, I want to live here. And seriously, it was cushy. Really super nice, top of the line space for my dad. So we did the right thing, he and my sister. And he was looked after. But the thing is, I told him, I said, I'm not going to come see you anymore. I'm cutting you off, just so you know. And I'll always love you. I mean, that has nothing to do with it. We're too toxic around each other. I can't deal with that. I'm on my healing journey. You're not. You're my abuser. So I'm going to mosey on with my life. But you know that I love you and I always have. And we left on good. I left him on good terms, and he died a few years later. So yeah, both my parents are gone. And my brother who raped me, he died. He committed suicide when he was 33. So when I was 20. So my abusers are dead. So, but the thing is the damage done at the age of 42 left me wanting to kill myself. Right? And I had always had suicidal ideation, but at the age of 42, 41 and a half, I actually was going to commit suicide for the last time. And I was really sure that I was going to do it. And I was just I couldn't believe the devastation of what they had done to me. And I was just like, you know, it's not okay what they did. And so that's why I speak out about this stuff, because I want people to know, you know, survivors to know that you did not deserve that. I did not deserve that. No one, I mean, I just keep saying it over and over. No child should ever be abused. There's just no excuse for abuse. There really isn't. Some people will excuse it away and they'll say, well, it was just that whoever my abuser was having a hard time. Or, whatever gets you through the day and the night, it's all right. Because the issue is my sister's like that. And whatever helps her to get on with her life and have a good life, that's what people need. For me, it was to get in touch with the reality of why I wanted to kill myself and allow myself to grieve the wounding and deal with the flashbacks and learn to heal. That's what I needed to do. So see, it's sort of whatever you need, right? Some people, like I say, it's no insult. Like my sister, she just does her thing. She's not probably ever going to be on a healing journey. That's her deal. Whatever you need to do for yourself to have a good life, right? I always tell people to reach out and get help, but that's because I know so many survivors are very isolated and lonely and quite often isolated. And that's a sad place to be. Right? It's good to have friends, especially good friends that care about you. And that's why I always tell people to reach out, especially to other survivors, because many survivors, even though we have relationship difficulties, know how hard it is for other people. So they tend to be more empathetic because they understand where you've come from. And, it's a It's better than being alone all the time, right? Because in the world, it's hard to find friends who can relate to what we've been through. I know for most people, like sitting here, you just look at me, you don't really know how I am in my whole day, right? But people who have not been abused or don't know much about abuse find me bizarre. They really do. I don't have very many friends that were never abused, right? I have in the past had a few, and they don't usually last long. They just can't figure out where I'm coming from. They don't have a clue. And they don't understand my life. You know what I mean? They're like, you're 55, you've got no children, you know, you're kind of just barely making it, squeezing it through life. Like, what are you doing, man? You know what I mean? They don't understand where I've come from, see? And even if I tell them, they still don't understand it because they weren't abused. So they're just like, so, you know. And for me, I'm doing really well. You know what I mean? Because I mean, compared from where I've come from and what I allowed myself to get into as a teenager with drug use and you know, that wasn't forced on me. I actually wanted to do that because I was trying to escape my reality of being abused. So I was like, I'm going to join my brothers and I'm going to do drugs. And that's what I did. And I did that for a long time, till the age of 21, almost 22, and got off of that. But then had a really hard time just trying to be an adult. You know, I was headed for a life of probably, who knows, drug overdose, crime, suicide, you know. So I worked really hard to just change that stuff so I could stay alive. And you know, it's been very difficult, very, very difficult. And like I said, I'm always able to hold a job, which is great. But the thing is that my personal life, you know, over the as an adult over the years has been very difficult to navigate. Um, and you know, it's hard, right? So that's why I always tell people, make sure, you know, if you're struggling and you're suffering on your own and you don't want to be on your own, because some people like to be on their own, and that's okay. I'm actually kind of a loner. I have a lot of friends on Facebook, and I'm actually involved with lots of stuff and volunteering with AU4H. And my friends, like we call each other sissies, sisters, because we're just a bunch of goofballs. But it's Donna Shear and Lee Roberts. Donna Shear, she's like an author, and she's been advocating for years to stop and prevent child abuse. And she's not a survivor herself, but she's just such an empathetic person. Like, she just loves people. And Lee Roberts is a survivor of abuse, and we hooked up years ago to work to stop and prevent child abuse and also to help survivors of abuse. So I'm volunteering with them again. And, you know, they understand me. They get me completely. We've met in person before, and they totally get me. They think I'm doing great. They're like, man, just keep going. I have a lot of support from survivors of abuse, see, who they know how hard it is, you know. And absolutely, anybody who wants to add me on Facebook, please do. I have lots of friends who are survivors of abuse. I don't actually post survivor stuff, not much. I mean, I post a few things, not too much on my Facebook wall because I don't want to burn my other friends out who are not survivors. I actually have other pages that I post on, you know what I mean? So you can find all that. But I'm Lori.Smith.Calvin. See, there's so many Lori Smiths. If you look at, there's just millions of us. Lori Ann Smith is one of the most common names on the planet, believe it or not. And so I had to kind of, you know, for my name, so that people could recognize who I am, I kind of have to do stuff like that, right? So yeah, anybody who wants to hook up with me on Facebook, please do. I do post on there, but usually just kind of uplifting stuff, you know, flowers. I'm into flowers. You would never know. I'm always just looking all slobbed out, and you know, you don't see any flowers around here. But actually, I love flowers, and I'm kind of a girly girl, even though I'm a sort of a punk. But I love flowers and things like that, so I post stuff like that. But yeah, you're always welcome to hook up with me, absolutely. And if you know, I have other pages on that I do post child abuse stuff on. That's one child abuse survivor to another on Facebook. It's a Facebook page. And I have author Lori Ann Smith page that I update now and then, you know, and stuff like that. So if you're interested, you can check my stuff out for sure. But I love to have friends on Facebook and in my life, you know. So hook up with me if you want to. Absolutely. Whatever you do, don't suffer on your own. You know, I've been there. I've done it. And I felt like who was I going to call that would even understand remotely what I've been through? And who was I going to call that would understand what I'm going through as an adult, you know? And I thought, well, who am I gonna, I'm on my own, man. I mean, I was really alone. And that was such a horrific place to be. And I've been there most of my adult life. So, except for when I met my husband, who was a very good man, but now he's passed away. So, um, it's don't suffer on your own if you don't want to be alone, like I'm saying. I mean, some people like to be alone, and that's perfectly okay. But if you feel like you need friends and you need some companionship, and especially from people that understand, reach out to some survivor groups, you know, and then just keep yourself safe. You have to watch what you're doing in those too, because people are people, right? They do say hurtful things and stuff. That's why I like the ASCA, because they don't allow that. Right? There's no hurtful things going on in the ASCA at all. You're just not allowed. At the meetings, no one's allowed to say anything derogatory or negatory, or you're just not allowed. It's just that's the group rules, and we hold to the rules. I'm actually just started survivors groups. I started ASCA and also the CIA Survivors of Incest Anonymous. So if anybody is interested in that, check out their websites. They have lots of free groups. Those are free, and I just started groups. So if you're interested, hook up with me. And yeah, I agree. It's hard to find people that genuinely understand what you've been through. Absolutely, as survivors. And I mean, like I said, we've all survived different things as survivors of abuse. The only real commonality that we really have is that we were abused as children in some way. But in that, there's empathy, because we understand what it is to suffer as a child in abuse, right? So that's why it's really important to reach out to somebody who will be there for you, who will listen to you, who won't run you down or try to tell you, well, why didn't you do this and why didn't you do that? And you should have got help, and trying to make you feel worse than you already do. Right? You don't want that. So that's why you reach out to a healthy support group, a group that actually has moderators who don't allow that kind of stuff, right? And get some good help, right? Find a good friend, right? Why not? So that's it for today. I hope you all have a good day. I really do. I wish you all the best. And if I can help you find resources or anything, just get a hold of me. My info's on the About section on my website address and all. I always say that. It's actually my email address I'm talking about, my Gmail address. You can contact me if you want to. But I'm always willing to help people look for resources, or if you just need a friend to talk to. I'm always around. I'm not working right now, see, so I've got lots of time. So if you need something, get a hold of me. If you can't cope, you call a crisis line. If you think, I don't know, I don't even know how I'm going to be able to breathe for the next 2 seconds, because I've been there, right? Many times, actually, but I've been there. And you know what? If that, like I said on my show yesterday, if that happens to me again, which it hasn't since I was 42, even with my husband passing away, I'm handling things quite well. But I'm serious, if you can't cope and I can't cope, the first thing I'm going to do is grab that flipping phone and I'm calling a crisis line. And if that crisis line doesn't help me, then I'm going to call another one until I find the right one. Because I'm not going down because of what somebody else did to me. And I don't want you to do that either. Do not be destroyed by your past. Do not be destroyed by what somebody did to you. Not okay, right? And don't destroy yourself, right? So have a wonderful day, everybody. Talk to you tomorrow.